Hi, Karen. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry we didn't connect earlier, but I think we're both on the same page on this.
Sure, yeah.
Mm.
Uh, do I look okay? I'm doing this on my phone, so
You
I
look
don't want you
great.
looking up my nose.
You look very summery.
Oh, good, good.
Pretty outfit.
Oh, thank you. Yes, what you said, I thought, well, that's how I remember. We didn't think a bylaw was necessary.
Yeah,
And yeah, because I was like you, I thought until you started talking about it, I thought, what's she talking about?
yeah, I know. It's been a while. June
Yes,
2nd
it
was a
has.
long time ago.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, how's your summer been?
it's been good. We've been on the Oregon coast doing some hiking and swimming and all that, and that was
Oh, we're on
great.
the coast there.
Just north of Newport, we have a place at Otter Crest, the inn at Otter Crest, a timeshare. So
Oh, I bet
we usually
that's
get
nice.
we get down there once a year. My brother takes the other week, so we share the timeshare.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, that's a bit of a drive, but if you can stay a week, that's nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have
Well, I
relatives.
have.
Yeah,
Are
I have
they
relatives
voting?
important. What?
Are they voting today on new members or something?
I I'm not sure. You mean
Yeah,
the board?
yeah, Jean, I just reminded her of the meeting today, and she said, oh, something like they were doing something for new members. And I haven't been, with summer, I haven't been as
Mhm.
regular as usual.
Well, Tom's here. He can tell us.
yeah. Well,
Oh, hi, Tom.
hello. Um, I'm a novice at this. I just got, I want to make sure, yeah, I see a symbol that we're recording. You have to jump through a lot of hoops when you use this administrative thing. It's,
Mm,
it's,
Yeah, I did get a
in fact,
recording notice when I first signed on.
yeah, it's
yes.
two-factor. Yeah, I'm the administrator and I have to go through Michelle Caldwell, our assistant
Oh,
operations manager, and I have to get a special password from her, and then I have to do two-factor ID where I get a 6-digit code
Oh, I see.
from her. So we're good till 6:30 this evening, and possibly what you were talking about was that the board has to choose its 4 officers: president, vice president,
oh, that
secretary, and
must be it.
treasurer. But there isn't anything about new members.
Okay, that must have been it. I'm probably going to duck out about 5 because Biden's supposed to be speaking, and I would like to hear what he has to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
Um,
yeah, we're on there. I am on, you are, and you can chime in too, Sue, but on the agenda around 4:30, so that should work.
Okay, sure. Okay.
yeah, that hopefully, no, I don't, I only got one screen here, so I'm not going to screen share. So, the board members, and I'm not sure whether you got it, Karen, or not, got the agenda.
I
If you
did.
did, okay, you did, good.
Is
Um,
Betsy not here?
no, see, she's off the board now.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So,
who's going to be president?
well, that's the big question.
Who do we think? Or do we have any idea?
We don't have any idea. Well, I hope I could have allowed 3 hours for that, but I tried to allow about 20 minutes or 25 minutes
Uh-huh.
to deal with that one. Let's see, what did I allow? Election of board officers. I allowed uh, I hope we'll be able to move through the agenda when we get a quorum on the board here, because we have to have a quorum before we can do business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I'm only seeing 3 board members, but it's not quite 4 o'clock yet.
Yes, yes. Okay. Wow. And Tom,
Yeah.
you're doing well?
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, well as can be expected. And like I've been prone to say the last few days, I'm 4 months older than Joe Biden. What's that tell you?
Run for president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I
I'm
saw
sure.
Larry Hodge today. That I graduated from my cardiac physical therapy today, and I hadn't seen Larry for a while, but he was there today, and he's looking good. I didn't realize he was 10 years older than me. He's 87, but I think he just sold his place at. He got a phone call during the class, and when he hung up, he said, I sold my house. So I didn't know, I don't think he's trying to sell down in Arizona. So I think it might be the one at, what's it called? Kendall Yards.
Kendall Yards. Yeah, I don't know which one it is. He does have two, and they are committed to living at Rockwood. So I don't know.
What's your button say, Tom?
My button.
Hmm.
Button. Let's see. What does it say? How do I get this?
Harris. Hey, where'd you
Yeah,
get a Harris? Where'd you get that?
I just blocked out Biden.
Oh, I didn't even have a Biden one. Oh, okay. Well, how are we all feeling about this tremendous flip?
Well, I've gotten, I did it about 24 hours ago. I've gotten 6 thumbs ups.
Very good. It's exciting times. We're back on track.
Okay, I just got a text from Doug Deaton. Has a link been sent for the meeting? If so, where do I find it? Oh, Jesus. Uh, can
If
anybody?
just searches his email for UUCS, it will come up with the links to the
Yeah.
weekly meetings.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Hello,
UUCS Zoom links will do it.
Search your emails for UUCS Zoom links. Search your emails for UUCS Zoom links for the week. It came out on Tuesday, period. Well, we'll see what that does. So far we are at 3 board members.
How many do you need?
We're supposed to have a quorum to do business, and a quorum of 7 board members is 5.
Before the meeting starts, may I share my screen with you all?
Well,
Hi,
I'm not
Cindy.
sure. Try it.
Nope. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, there's probably a way I could authorize that, but I'm not. Lynn, how do I do that? Lynn knows all about this, and I'm the novice.
Well, you should be able to do it by just going down to the
Oh, there's a share button down below?
screen share and then click on the arrow, and it should give you options, and you can say anybody can share. You just click on that button.
Okay, options, share sound, optimize. I'm on a Mac, so it might look different.
Should have an option to say that says allow anybody to share or something like that.
It doesn't have.
Is it
Yeah,
I'm on my phone, so I can't even.
Yeah, I am too, and I can't see who all's at the meeting.
oh, well, I clicked on one of them and it says wallpaper, so that's not the right one.
Oh. Now you're hidden, Tom.
Yeah, because
Now you're back.
let's see.
Oh, you look different, Tom. You have a black background.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
don't know how to do that, Cindy.
I was going to share a photo of my daughter Nora and her new baby. I'm down in Portland. I'm
Is
down
this
in
the
Portland
first
with them.
baby?
It's her first
Oh.
baby. My older daughter, Katie, has 2 kids. They're 8 and 3, almost 3. They live in Scotland, but they're also here in Portland. So we've got the whole family.
Oh, how nice.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Thank
Wow.
you so much. It's very exciting.
Okay, so um could be a very frustrating non-endeavor here.
So
We
is
need-
this the first meeting since the new board?
Yeah, yeah. We need Dick Burkhardt and Doug Deaton and Justin Bell.
Can you call any of them? Do you have a phone handy or?
No, I can't. I think I've got them all in my contact list. Let me try. This is screwing up my time schedule.
Let me try to call Doug and I'll see if I can walk him through it. I'll put myself on mute.
Okay, and I'm gonna try to call Dick Burkhardt. Okay, we should have Dick Burkhardt very soon.
It is Christmas in July for men and women serving at Fairchild Faith, the ones deployed all over the world.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Hi.
Okay, I don't have a contact for Justin in my contact list. Does
But
anybody?
he just called me and I read him your email, so he's searching for the link. I told him just to search for UUCS, but if his computer was as obstinate as mine was, it's going to take him a little time.
Okay,
It seems like the cyber world is getting crazier.
we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So actually, we could start the meeting.
Yeah.
And so we're starting a little bit late here. That works against things. I am calling the meeting to order. It's now 4:07 on July 24th, 2024. I'm Tom Mosher, and I'm acting as pro tem because we don't have any officers elected at this point. I can clarify that Marilyn Johnson has agreed to continue to be our recording secretary. And although she may not be present here, she will review the recording of this meeting. The next item I had on the agenda was to briefly introduce the trustees. I'll introduce myself. I've been on the board for an entire year. Been the secretary in this past year and have 2 more years in my term. As probably all of you know, a longtime member of the church, joined in January of 1969, served in all kinds of positions. After I retired in 97, Mary and I snowbirded for a long time, many years, and weren't here during the winters for probably nearly 25 years. But as of March of 2020, when COVID started, we have become permanent residents. And as you know, most of you know, she's in skilled nursing in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's. And I'm living in our house previously occupied. So who wants to go next? Luba, Cindy, Dick, Doug?
Justin just tried to call me again.
Well, work with him as much as you can, maybe mute yourself. I would point out, just so people are aware, Todd is a Board of Trustee member. He's just a non-voting member. So that means that he can be involved in all of our discussions, can offer comments on any item of business. He just can't vote on those. So some people don't realize that.
Okay. Do you want me to work on Justin or?
Yeah, really
Okay.
need to. Please go ahead and work with him as best you can. Luba, how about a background on you for the people who don't know that? Try to confine yourself to a minute or so.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I'm new. I don't remember how many months. Just I'm a substitute. When Tom explained to me that there is a position that needs to be filled in as soon as possible because the person, what's her name? That I'm substituting for.
Well, you're not substituting for anybody. You're actually a full board member, and I think you have you have the remainder of a 3-year term, which, if I remember correctly, without looking at my chart, you have this term and another term. So you have 2 more years this year and
Two more. Okay, so yeah. Well, I was appointed. I was not voted for. I agreed, and that's it. I've been the member of this church for many years, since 95, and have never been the member of the board of trustees. I find it, frankly speaking, boring. and there's so many things I don't know. I'm just learning stuff, including the language, which is horrible from the position of a person who is bilingual and not native speaker. So that's briefly.
Thank you.
Could you remind me of your last name again?
Johnston.
Johnson, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not Russian name, yeah.
Yeah. You might put that in your Zoom, yeah.
Oh, okay. I will correct that. Thank you.
Those of us are forgetful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cindy or Dick, you want to go ahead there?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
I'm Cindy Fine. I've been a member of the church. I'm thinking it's been about 35 years. Older than my baby daughter, who's 34. So longtime member, various positions. I was employed by the church for a while as RE assistant, executive in charge of glue, glitter, and popsicle sticks. Did a lot of work with OWL over the years. And I retired about 2 years ago from my last job, which was working at aging and long-term care. And I've been focused on travel and fun and grandkids for the last 2 years. So happy to be a member of the board. New to the board, this is my first meeting, so the beginning of a glorious 3-year term.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to go ahead, jump in there, Dick?
Sure. Well, this is my second year on the board, but I was basically born at UU, grew up in Tacoma. I remember going to the UU church in Tacoma in kindergarten. So I'm basically a lifelong UU, and I'm also still a member of the Saltwater UU Church just south of Seattle and Des Moines, right next to Saltwater State Park. If you ever get there, on the back, you can actually walk down to the beach from that church. But I've decided to join you guys as a Zoom member because I've been very involved in UU National Affairs for many years, mostly because I've been on the board of UU's for Just Economic Community. And now I'm also on the board of UU's for Multiracial Unity Action Council. So I'm familiar with lots of things, and people thought that might be a good perspective to have someone who, and I also listening to UUA board meetings. So I try to follow UUA politics and dig below the surface, which is not easy these days. And last year I even ran for the nominating committee, knowing I wouldn't get elected, but just to see what it was going to be like and to make some statements. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep on top of things.
Thank you. And I'll point out to other people that Dick served in this past year as our trustee treasurer. That's something else we can discuss later on. I've gotten another opinion from our legal counsel, Mary Giannini, that there might be an alternative to something along those lines, but that's something for another conversation. We would look at you, Doug, if you'd update us, give us a little background for those who don't know you well.
Okay, I'll say that I just spoke with Justin. He says he's on by phone. Can you tell?
Yeah, I see him.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. Okay. Well, so this will be my second year on the board, and I joined the church about 2 years ago or something like that. Todd has it in the record there. I'm new to the UU, though I had visited the church in Portland a couple times with friends. I lived in Portland for 15 years before I moved here about 3.5 years ago. So, but I never felt moved to join there. But when I met the good folks here, you good folks, and heard Todd, I was very much moved to become a churchgoer again. So I'm happy to be part of this group. I'm originally from Virginia. Spent my first 43 years there, and moved to Albuquerque. Largely because my daughter was growing up in Denver, and I wanted to be closer to her. And then I've spent about 21 years there, and then 15 years in Portland. So I like to move around. And Portland got kind of a lot of traffic and a lot bigger in the 15 years I was there. So I discovered Spokane, and I really love this city.
Hey, thank you. And Doug has served as vice president in this past year. Now we're down to you, Justin, if you'd care to give us a little bit of an update on your background. You're in new presence on our board.
Unmute, Justin.
Looks like Justin's on his phone and perhaps is having some trouble unmuting.
Okay.
Is that
There it
better
is.
now?
You're unmuted.
Okay. All right. Just briefly, I'm struggling with this phone. I'm not at all used to this phone application. So just briefly, I've been attending the church for about 17 years. I've been involved in a variety of things, but not taken any interest in board or administration till this time. My main interest has been rather ecological. So I have a long history of ecological things, including part of the Spokane Alliance and the Sustainable Works when I first came to Spokane. Outside of that, I've helped install cameras at the church, and I'm working on some other things now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That allows us to move on to approving or amending the agenda. And I would have one small item I want to insert in as just below item 8. And that's just to describe, make sure that everybody got the month-to-month guide that Lynn Janesian and Rebecca Adams prepared, that kind of is a guide for what board, some deadlines the board has for things to do during the year. I modified it slightly and Rebecca worked on it, and so there's a new one out there. And maybe I don't have to mention it, but I'll just leave it at that, that was sent to the board as a guide, and we'll refer to it from time to time. I'm going to keep it at the top of my list, however I interact with the board. The next thing would be to approve the minutes, and just about within the last hour, I finally got a chance to look at the minutes that had been a draft that had been prepared from Marilyn Johnson, the minutes of our June meeting. And I had some corrections and an addition rewording that I sent out. One was to change the date of the May minutes. She referred to them as the June minutes. The other one was a misspelling of Todd Eckloff's name and a misspelling under the 7 principles. And then regarding the email policy, and when I went back and looked at my notes, I would like to reword that to say, and Tom Mosher and Doug Deaton presented an alternative email use policy as an amendment to the adopted one. It was submitted to the trustees by email with explanation of the policy, and the policy and the email are attached. I'm going to ask her to attach those. It was recommended by Doug and me that it be considered at the next regular board meeting, which would be this board meeting. And as you probably saw from the agenda, because we have so much to do, we're going to defer that to the next regular board meeting. So with those corrections, are there any other corrections or amendments to the minutes that we got? Okay, seeing none or hearing none, I will consider those as approved changes and corrections or additions, and we'll work with her, with Marilyn to see that those get done. We're now down to you, Todd. Do you have any, this would be number 5 on the item on the agenda that the board members have. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'm gonna keep it real short, just because I know we run over a bit, and I really don't have much, but a couple of important things. One, we are switching over to another employee benefits plan that will be separate from what the UUA has been offering. It's going to save the church money and be better benefits, thanks to our wonderful operations manager, who seems to be able to pull lots of rabbits out of lots of hats. So that's already in the works. It's been approved by our personnel team, which is Robert Janician and Betsy Rush. So if and when the board or whoever starts to have congregational conversations around whether or not we remain part of the UUA, I know that was perhaps the main sticking point, how it's going to impact staff. So you'll know that that's sort of an issue that can be handled now. The other thing I wanted to let you know, I spoke with Lilia, who is also a board member who's not been able to make it as often as she would have liked due to a relatively recent change in her life where she became a school teacher. And it's become really hard for her to make these meetings. So we spoke, and she has expressed with some regret the need to step off of the board at this time. And I told her that I would convey that message. And of course, we thanked her for her work and understood. And she wanted to let you guys know how much she enjoyed working with you and loves the church and loves the board. So with that, we can probably approach our nominating team and ask them to start looking for a replacement, at least for the next year, to fill in her vacant position.
Okay, actually, let me suggest make a motion as a small board. The chair can do that. I move that we accept with the resignation of Lilia as she has requested.
Second.
Okay, those, any discussion, about that? Seeing no discussion, I declare that motion, approved. And she did fill position 4, and, whoever the next president is or secretary will talk with the nominating committee. I think the board can consult the nominating committee, but that the board is actually the one who chooses a replacement or an appointment for a vacant position. But we'll work out that detail as is appropriate or is as needed. Anything else, Todd?
No, that's it. One thing I would just suggest is that there are simpler ways to record the minutes that might save our minute maker a lot of time. And especially now that they're recorded and we can go back and look at them. Generally it is, includes who attended, the date and time, that sort of thing, the items that were discussed, and then any decisions that were made. So it doesn't have to go into a lot of great detail, which might save the board and her some time. And then if you wanted to go back and review what was said, that would be in the recording. So just a suggestion that I'm making, doesn't have to be decided today, but to look at some of the online suggestions around what goes into minutes. Board might want to adopt another format that would make it easier on everybody.
Well, actually, in response to that, since I was the formal secretary, I worked very closely with her. Her minutes are very closely following the models out of Robert's Rules of Orders, and for the most part, they are as brief as you just described. There was in this time under email policy more of her efforts to transcribe dialogue than was appropriate, if that's what you're referring to. But she and I have talked a number of times about that the debate that goes on during a motion isn't necessary at all. It's just how the motion turned out. And the other thing, if there's a report submitted, if it's written, it could be attached. And that's the preferred way, but that's a lot of work on somebody's part. So, yeah, I think.
No, I'm not making an issue of it, Tom. I just was saying that just to save everybody time, the dialogue doesn't have to, it doesn't hurt if it is. It's not like there's anything wrong with having it in there, but obviously someone can't try and transcribe everything. So I was just offering an opinion on how to make the process simpler. Nothing wrong with what's going on. Much appreciation to the hard work that goes into it.
Yeah, you're right on. You're right on. Ops team liaison report. This would come from Doug Deaton, who was the appointed liaison on the board to the ops team during last year.
Okay.
And you
All
have
right.
a report.
I'll just read what I've sent to Marilyn for the minutes. The ops team held a brief meeting on July 9th and discussed where buildings and grounds issues. Water damage due to gutter problem has been corrected. Still working on issues with birds at the back of the chapel, and the new RE wing doors are going to be painted. And then there was a discussion about weddings, that they are tough on the property, and the rule on the facility host requirements is being changed to 2 hosts instead of 1 for larger groups. And the fees, looking at the fees, it's $800. It's been $800 for an event, for a wedding, and maybe it's going to become more like $1,500, possibly even more, as well as raising the damage deposit. So that was really, I think, unless Todd, you think of anything else that.
No, I think you got it. Thanks, Doug.
Okay. So that was.
But I noticed that was the June 9th meeting. Was there not a meeting in July?
Let's see, did I get the date wrong?
Well, you said June 9th, what I read.
Did I say June? July 9th. Did I
Oh,
say?
July 9th, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is number 7, which would put us almost on time. And that would be any information from Karen Dorn Steele regarding the endowment team speaking to pledges that are related to a deceased member during a given fiscal year. And I don't know whether you need to give a little bit of background on that for the new board members or not, Karen, but however you see as appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Well, first of all, our Legacy Society met on June 2nd. We had a very nice meeting of about 24 members of the Legacy Society. And for those of you who might not know, these are people who've either contributed and or contributed $1,000 already to the endowment, or have designated the church as a beneficiary of their estate in some kind of estate documents like a will. So we had 24 of those people meeting at Bill and Barb Morkill's house on June 2nd for our annual meeting. And we, of course, discussed the very nice rise in the endowment. It's up to almost $900,000 by the end of the first quarter of this year, and we'll soon be getting a new report. And we're giving a record number of record annual contribution to the operating fund because of the rise in that account. But the topic today is our discussion at that same meeting about this issue of unfulfilled pledges due to a death early in the pledging year. When a member is pledged for an entire 12 months, but dies, say, 2 months into the pledging year, what happens with that pledge? Now, this is a very rare occurrence. It's only happened twice in the last 2.5 years, but it nonetheless has brought up a few issues. Mary Giannini, who's a member of the endowment team, is also a lawyer, and so she gives us her lawyerly look at these issues. And one is that pledges, according to her, can be considered a debt owed by an estate to an organization. For instance, she's told us that some large college endowments have pursued legal action actually against people who pledged but haven't fulfilled their pledge. But of course, that would be highly unlikely in a small church. It has never been done and probably never would be done. But still, a Legacy Society members expressed their opinions that if they did die early in a pledge year, they would want, the majority of them said that they would want their pledges to be fulfilled. So we need a procedure, not a bylaw change, nobody thought, but a procedure to get the intent of our members about that particular subject. And the procedure would probably be having someone designated by the Board of Trustees to contact estates and the donors and find out what their intent is. I mean, it could be our treasurer, it could be Rebecca and Todd doing that, because from the endowments team perspective, when an estate is settled and we get a donation that goes to the endowment team, we cannot divide that up between pledges and endowment. Everything we get at that phase after an estate is settled is considered principal, and we cannot invade the principal of the endowment. So this would not be something that the endowment team would take on, but somebody else in the church to get clarity as to people's intent. And Mary Giannini said, well, the best time to find out people's intent is before they die, obviously. So, and most of the endowment, the legacy team members, Legacy Society members told us that they would like to have their pledge fulfilled as a separate action, and then also have money to go to the endowment. But it can't be, it can't be ipso facto. We have to know their intent ahead of time. So that could be a question asked of all pledging members of the church, or just Legacy Society members, who are the people most invested in the endowment fund, at some time, perhaps early in the next fiscal year, or, right sometime next late winter or next spring next year. Is it your intent to fulfill a pledge before giving a donation to the endowment? Some question that asked that of the congregation. And of course, the long-term solution to this is not to rely on a few, wealthy people giving large pledges and have and not to be dependent on a handful of people that really skews the budget in a way that's difficult during the fiscal year, but to overall grow our endowment, which we're doing, which puts us in a less vulnerable position. So that would be the Legacy Society's recommendation, to just have this process to determine the intent of donors before they die.
So do you see that as like a survey or questionnaire going out, asking people to, who are Legacy Society members to actually sign a document saying that is their preference?
Yes.
Or that is their, okay. So you don't see any need for a new policy in the board's governance document or a bylaw that you think that this can be worked around without doing that?
I think it can be. I think it can be worked around.
Okay.
Karen? may I?
Yes.
I'm
Sue
on
is the
the
co-chair, by the
team.
way, of the
Yeah.
endowment team. She's here too.
And I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but didn't we speak about on a pledge form, there would be the question, just a statement that would be checked yes or no, or not checked. To clarify this, did we speak about that? It could be something as
Yes, that
simple
would
as
be,
that.
that was one suggestion, one way of doing it, and just, to send it out generally to everybody who's pledging and ask them what their intent would be. Which would probably be the simplest way to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, now some of us, like, I don't fill out a pledge form. I just send increase my pledge or whatever it happens to be. I just send an email to Rebecca because I don't get a pledge. So somehow there would be somebody tracking this. Would you imagine that would be the staff, or would the endowment team be involved in any of the administration of this suggestion?
I don't think the endowment team should be in the, because our charter is to grow the endowment.
Okay.
But, and so I think that somebody else should do that. And probably the staff could track. I think most people fill out pledge forms still, but if we're missing some pledge forms, we could have a generic form, which which would make it easy to track in the office.
Do you
Sue,
know what
I
they
think,
do with those forms when the office gets any pledge forms? Do they keep them, file them away, anything like that at this time?
I don't
No
know.
one know that? Okay.
Yeah, we would keep those on file, whether it's a hard copy or digital.
So there you would have your record unless we receive something else rescinding what they've said on the latest pledge document.
And do I understand that these forms would go to the administrator of the estate if someone dies, so that person knows what the expectation is? Is that?
Yes,
how this
that's
would
the
work?
idea, that we would have a form that we could refer to.
And then
for
so
the
basically
admin.
asking that person if they were willing to make that donation independently of other things in the will.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think most churches,
Muted, Dick, muted.
You're
We
muted.
lost
Dick.
you.
I'm thinking most churches, I think, do ask people to make out pledge forms even in this digital age, just so they can keep track of these things better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
So like for Tom, they could ask Tom, well, will you fill out this form and check this box or not, or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
Cindy
the-
had a question too.
I just wanted to say, Sue was kind of reading my mind, that I believe we do have an online pledge form. And I think it would be a pretty simple thing to add a checkbox. My intent is that my pledge be fulfilled in the event of my death. And if people check it, there's our answer.
Mhm. Good language too.
Todd, is this something that the ops team and the operations manager, Rebecca, could work out the details of for the next pledge drive?
I think so, yeah, we ought to be able to find some wording for that would,
Yeah, with us as a policy board, it seems like assigning that to a standing team would be a good thing. Maybe they consult a little bit with the endowment team if there were something to be consulted about, but it seems like that's something the operations team or the finance team should be have some involvement with.
It would also have a practical effect because, as most of you know, sometimes it takes a long time for estates to be settled. So if we did have this checkbox that said, I want my pledge to be fulfilled, then that pledge could, could be applied to the current operating year budget instead of having to wait, until an estate is settled.
right? So Karen, if I can just get clarification on that because of the wording that's been suggested. So the issue is not so much that we get a designated pledge, right? If or if we get an undesignated pledge, or I'm sorry, an undesignated gift. In other words, someone passes away and someone says, "Oh, their estate left you 10 grand or something," and they have not paid their full pledge. We would assume that we receive the money for that pledge. That's not an issue. It's automatic, right? Because we know what they were planning on doing with at least a portion of that money, and that was to fulfill a pledge. It is only when it is designated, right? So if there's an issue where somebody says, I want 10,000 to go to the UUCS endowment fund. All right, so but because what I understand you saying is because of Mary Giannini's legal opinion that the congregation is still in a sort of contract, a financial contract due to that pledge, that will justify us overriding that request in the will for it to go into the endowment fund and take what is necessary to complete the pledge. So, I mean, that sounded confusing, I know, but so if it would a statement such as, in the event of my death, I would intend for my pledge to be fulfilled, will that cover somebody designating a $10,000 gift to the endowment fund and then compensating for their unpaid pledge from that $10,000 or whatever the amount might
Well,
be?
it sends it in two different directions. I mean, we're all working for the same goals in keeping the church finances stable. And it would just allow if someone, and someone could opt out too. They could say, no, I'm not going to check this box. But if they did check the box, then that would be treated differently from any eventual endowment, which would, any contribution to the endowment itself. It would truncate it. So it would be clearer because the money could be, if the estate is willing, if that's the only problem with this is, as you know, estates can be complicated. So somebody might say that was their intent, but where is that money going to come from after they die before there's an estate wish, an estate bequest for an endowment down the line. But still, it makes it clear that person who died wanted their money, their unfulfilled pledge to be fulfilled first before the endowment contribution.
Okay.
So in summary, without having to deal with emotion, is the board generally in agreement with the concept presented by the endowment team and that the operations team and or the consultation with the finance team and the operations manager will work something out suitable for the next generosity drive, which would be in the fall of this year, 2024.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
Okay. All right.
One other thing that we might consider just as a backup, sort of belt and suspenders, is when someone makes a pledge, a gift to the legacy committee, to the endowment, within the paperwork that they would do for that endowment, there would be a line, I consider this separate from my pledge to the church, and my wish would be that my pledge is fulfilled prior to any endowment. I don't know, thought.
Good idea.
Mhm.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Well, you get competing documents now. You have a will, which is going to be the overarching
Yeah.
document, right? So if their will says, I leave 10,000 to the UUCS endowment fund, that is the overarching document. And that's where we end up having a problem.
Mhm.
If it's designated for the endowment, that's where we have a problem.
No, we can't
If
touch
they
it.
still haven't fulfilled their pledge, suddenly we have 10,000 and their will says that's supposed to go to the endowment fund, right? So we want a statement that would say to us, it doesn't have to be in the will, but to us as a church, my intention is, should I pass away unexpectedly, that my pledge would be fulfilled out of any gifts that I leave to the church, something to that effect. And then we would say, okay, we can justify taking the 5,000 out of the 10 or whatever it might be.
So this isn't something we are going to, if the family comes back and they're upset about this and all we as a church would do, this is a question, is say, this is what we have from Joe, that this was his wishes, so that's why we did it. We're not going to legally argue over this money, are we?
No, and when it really wouldn't be a situation where the family would probably even get involved. It's just we want to be integrity as a church
Mhm.
to the intention of the gift, right? But we also have the financial reality of if somebody passes away and we budgeted, to have $10,000 more than we're going to have now, and they leave a $10,000 gift for the endowment. Does that go to the endowment or does that go to to fulfill their pledge? So we just want to work out a simple way. And if we get their permission in advance, which I think is having it on that initial pledge form,
Yeah.
would be enough of an indicator for us to bypass whatever the will says, for us to bypass it, because we have the document saying, yeah, I know they gave that to the endowment, but they also gave us a statement saying I'd prefer to have my pledge fulfilled first.
Thank you.
The other thing that you might have the conversation about, Karen, and very possibly with the ops team is, we're all talking about documents that already exist with our Legacy Society members. It would be possible with Mary Giannini's help, since she's done this work before, because she actually helped us with some of our estate documents, prepare a one or two sentence codicil, which is an addendum to a will that somebody could sign, and then it would, so to speak, that any unpaid pledge upon my death can be part of my contribution to the endowment fund. So there could be something like that she could prepare that would be offered to people who haven't yet, or even like me, who would say, yeah, I'd sign that, and that would become part of my estate documents. So that's another approach that you haven't mentioned, but I think you ought to look into.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I could talk to her about that. And we're gonna do, starting this fall, we're gonna be doing some renewed education about the Legacy Society and what it is, and encouraging more people to get involved. So that's
Yeah,
a good idea.
I think
Good
the
idea.
lawyers need to be consulted more too, because if there's something in the will that says so much goes to the endowment, and then you have something else says complete my pledge, it might be interpreted as saying that the part that goes to the pledge would have to come out of the money, the general on part of the will that's unspecified, which would be normally be the part that would go to the family. And
Yeah.
so it might be interpreted as taking away from the part that goes to the family.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
gonna
that,
be.
so that would, I think that's
what
we need the lawyers to clarify how that would work out.
Okay, then are we kind of at the end of this, agenda item? Thank you, Karen. The next agenda item is, our election of officers, and we've allowed, about 25 minutes to discuss this. We have essentially, with the resignation of, goodbye, Karen. With the resignation of Lilia, we have, six board members and a vacant position. And we have 4 officer positions to fulfill. Does, anybody have any starting points? We have,
I'll start with saying, I'm happy to be vice president again. If that helps.
okay, we have somebody stepping forward to be vice president, volunteering to fill that office. And we have anybody else stepping forward for the remainder of president, secretary, and treasurer. And speaking about the treasurer, I have a email from Mary Giannini, in which I asked her pointedly, is there any way that we could have a, practically speaking, someone doing the treasurer's job as we have had in the past? We had a volunteer treasurer before we came upon language that a nonprofit corporation is supposed to have a trustee be a treasurer. And she responded back. She responded back with an email that essentially said there was an option that, practically speaking, and I just printed that out. Let me see. Oh, practically speaking, she said, Washington statutes and practice would permit the appointment of a treasurer by the board from the outside ranks of the trustees in order to assure appropriate expertise. The board, of course, has a responsibility of oversight, at least of the process, though not the substance of it. So that we would have the right to rely on the treasurer's expertise. She doesn't think the bylaws need to be amended. So she's kind of, when I talked with her a little bit more, she said, we can have a treasurer, but that we could not have that treasurer, trustee treasurer, be involved in the nuts and bolts, as previously a treasurer who was usually a retired CPA was intimately involved. So part of this, has been that a lot of the work of the nuts and bolts stuff comes from Rebecca as our operations manager and the bookkeeper, and you, Dick, as the designated trustee treasurer, were kind of in a token position. So
I
I
might
don't know whether you.
I might say something on that. It seemed to me my only real role was to, sort of report what Rebecca and whatnot had done to the board and sort of keep track of it. A role that could be part of the treasurer's role is helping to prepare the next year's budget and whatnot. But that seems to involve a lot of historical knowledge as to what the trends are and what to expect in terms of income and expenses and things like that, knowledge I didn't really have. So unless you have a treasurer with a lot of historical knowledge of the finances, again, you're basically back on relying on the staff to have that kind of knowledge, and then the treasurer is basically just sort of reporting that to the board. So it's kind of a strange thing. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like what we did last year with your position, in which you kind of did that. It would be more or less recognizing it kind of formally. But Todd, did you have a chance to explore this at all with Rebecca as to whether kind of what we've been doing, having a treasurer, a trustee designated as a treasurer, but having the nuts and bolt work being done by the staff. That's kind of the way it's been the last couple of 3 years, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the bigger solution would I mean, it would be great to have a CPA working with us again, right? We have our operations manager and we have our bookkeeper, and they do a pretty good job. But as far as conveying that information in a way that somebody understands it, that's a more fine-tuned piece of it that's been missing for a lot of years. So, I mean, one thing to do would be to have a distinction between a church treasurer and a board treasurer, so that you fulfill the requirement of the bylaws. And in fact, I think that is also a position that, according to the Washington State Nonprofit Handbook, you're supposed to have on the board. So you could have a board treasurer, but also if a CPA or someone came along who was really good with this kind of stuff, could serve as the church treasurer, who would then be able to put together a report and communicate with the board treasurer, who would then report back to the board. And that's really, I think, the board needs the treasurer so that the board is staying on top of the financial realities that are going on. And so sometimes I think that, the staff has trouble conveying that in a concise enough manner that it can be easily digested. So that's what we've been missing. We had Marie Bjork was a church treasurer for a number of years. Graham, forgetting Graham's last name, was a treasurer for a number of years. People who've had financial backgrounds, and they ended up doing quite a bit of work, but they weren't part of the board. They were just keeping up with what was going on, and sometimes catching errors and mistakes. So I think it'd be valuable to have that position filled if we could.
Yeah,
Well,
I
is
know I've
there
been
any
reading
way-
reports and sometimes asking questions, but again, like this year, so far, I guess we've got something like 90% of the pledges have been paid. And we're not supposed to know till next month, what the final figure is, but how to interpret things like that. I find it without historical knowledge, I find it difficult. And so to convey it to the rest of the boards, I have to understand it myself. What does that really mean? Is it really going to be 95% at the end? Or is that an indication, if we're at 90% now, that we got a problem, you see? And I don't have that kind of knowledge to know what to do there.
Right.
Well, has the staff actually been doing the work of, for lack of a better term, of a Marie Bjork, or previous Linda Lynn did stuff like that? She was a CPA before your time, Todd, probably. Is there something in place that the staff can do enough of this? I mean, she prepares the budget and she walks us through our budget summits and things like that. Is that?
I don't think so. Rebecca's very good at what she does, but she's not a financial expert, and our bookkeeper is good at what she does, but she's not perfect by any means either, and she's doing just some daily nitty-gritty of getting bills paid and keeping an account of things. The missing piece is, what Dick is getting at is somebody in the congregation who understands and is keeping a thumb on kind of what's happening, sometimes catching things or sometimes translating it in a way. That's what we've been missing for quite a number of years now.
Yeah.
I think Chuck Elson, who was also I think he was a CPA, was also our treasurer for a while, and having that person who can look at the information and understand and even come to the board meetings. And that's what those folks did. They didn't come every board meeting, but at least quarterly they would come and give the treasurer's report.
And I think also, I think I'm certain there's software that would look at historical trends, because the software they have now just sort of says what's happening now. But for some of these things, you need to look at historical trends and expenses and income, and if you're going to try to work harder on fundraising or pledging, how might that affect your projections?
But keep in mind, that's not what our staff,
If
we
we need
don't
some
have the staff for
software.
that. We don't
Yeah,
have the staff.
someone with historical knowledge can sort of do a lot of that intuitively. But it'd be nice to have some software that would actually be doing that the treasurer could just sort of look at that software and work with that, you see.
Well, we need to we need to put this down as an item for a future board to deal with, whether we could find a volunteer to serve in a more enhanced role like we've had in the past, or if we have to consider some kind of outside, paid help, but then that runs into an additional budget issue. But we still need to have a token treasurer, at least doing their best to fulfill the task of communicating between the operations staff and the board, at least on a quarterly basis as required, and annually at the annual meeting. So we do need to have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. And I did send out about a month ago what the bylaw requirements are for those positions. So do I hear anything coming forth from Luba or Cindy or Justin or Dick? I'm not willing to be a treasurer. I don't have that background. I've been secretary. I know I can do that. And I would volunteer to be secretary again, but then we're also looking for someone to be president and treasurer.
I could be treasurer again, but I really like, as I said, I would like to have someone with some expertise find the software I would just describe it. I know it's got to exist, something that would help us track trends over time. And that would make it much easier for the treasurer to help prepare the budget or evaluate how things are going and that kind of thing. But I don't have that expertise myself as to what software would be the best for that, but something that's presumably there are some industry standard kinds of software out there.
Well, we could have, as Todd has said, Rebecca's good at pulling rabbits out of the hat. Maybe she and the bookkeeper, and possibly you, Dick, if you were to be the treasurer, could look into the possibility of some software that would facilitate something while we also commit to trying to find someone who will serve as a treasurer outside of the board framework.
Yeah, it's even possible that the existing software they have will do what I've just been talking about if you knew how to run it, you see. I just don't know.
Okay.
Tom, would you, I'd love to nominate you for president. Would you be willing to take the post?
I've thought about this a lot because with two new members, it's hard to, and one person having dropped off. I want to say that I can do this, but I also would need to make it clear that everybody understands. I am now. I have some cardiovascular issues that I'm working with a cardiologist on. I have had recent surgery on my hip with reattaching partially torn tendons, two of them, and the surgeon and I've met with him 3 times after the surgery. We're not sure that we're not going to have to go back in and do something else again. And then, of course, as you know, I have a wife in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's who's also in a modified hospice program. But part of what I have done over the last 5 years that I've been involved because of Mary is I've been involved in 2 cognitive studies to several times a year take cognitive tests as part of building a database of people my age and how we're doing cognitively, and whether or not we're slipping into some kind of dementia or not. For the last 3 years, I've been steady as a rock with regard to what I'm doing. Part of what I think is because I'm so busy. Just that, of course, adds a level of stress, but I think I'm managing the stress pretty well. I would say that I would agree to do that, but also it's pretty unpredictable. And Doug, if you're vice president and I can't do it, that means that you would be the person doing it.
Well, the opportunities I had this past year supporting Betsy felt good to me. She like you really showed a grasp of what's going on in the church, and you show even more energy for organizing and knowing what needs to be organized, which is where I would fail as president. So I would feel very good in supporting you and filling in for you as I did for her. I forget once or twice for presiding over a meeting. So we could make a decent team maybe.
Well, somebody needs to do this. And we need to have a functioning board, and we need to have somebody at the head of it. And I do have a lot of experience ever since the splinter in 2020. I've been involved as a parliamentary advisor and attended almost all the board meetings, and I have worked with Lynn Janesian on redrafting and ultimately approving revised bylaws and a policy and procedures document. So I'm the logical person to go ahead and do this. And I would say that I will commit to doing my best in the role of the president. Because at this point, I don't see any alternative.
Well, then in nominating you for president of the Board of Trustees, which I do now, I commit to supporting you with my best efforts. Do I hear?
Okay, do we have candidates for president, vice president? And you step forward, Dick, as the treasurer in a similar capacity to what you did last year, with kind of a commitment to see if there's some way we can enhance some of the stuff that we've recently discussed. That was a question, Dick.
Guess he's thinking.
Okay.
Are we there with the treasurer, the president, and a vice president? I'm going to take that, your head movement, as a yes.
As a point of discussion, I wonder if we could say that we're taking it on a temporary position and you're still looking for a permanent and all. And
Well, we do need to have a trustee, at least as a token trustee, according to state law. And as Mary Giannini, our legal counsel, said, we can move the nuts and bolts part of it off to the side, but we still need to have a trustee who is a treasurer according to the law, Washington law for nonprofit corporations.
maybe I can restate it as acting president or acting treasurer, and still make it clear that we're looking for a replacement. I understand there's strains on both of you.
Well, so far, then I guess all we have is a president who is willing to make a commitment and a vice president. And we're looking for a secretary and a treasurer.
I would say I could serve as treasurer. I just like some of that help with some of that historical knowledge I don't have. That's all.
Well, I would, what, Todd, this is kind of an operation standpoint of how can we work on trying to fill in this void that has been discussed here with respect to some of the issues regarding a treasurer, a nuts and bolts treasurer.
I mean, I don't know. We can try. There's a certain level of financial expertise that needs to be had to understand. I don't understand it. I'm glad that we have a bookkeeper that does and an operations manager that somewhat does. But again, she's said several times she's not a financial expert by any means. So,
Well, maybe I can talk to her about this, find some software that can track these trends, so that software that can be used to.
but the problem with that again is, I mean, we do have software, right? And we have software we're using, so it does keep up with the data. The problem is understanding the data. We couldn't say let's buy software and then have to train our staff to use new software. By the way, they are switching to a new software, which may very well be easier. Dick,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I suspect that there are ways you can use the software to, make,
Well, we're using QuickBooks. We're using QuickBooks. We're using QuickBooks right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know QuickBooks?
Well, I use Quicken all the time, and I once tried to I actually used QuickBooks for about a year, and I got very, very frustrated with it.
It's very different. And so that's the issue.
It just took a lot of work and nitpicking, and I finally said it wasn't worth it, But in this case, understanding what's going on, a lot of it means being able to look at historical variations in income and expenses, and trying to understand what caused those variations and what might cause variations in the future. That's why I say historical knowledge comes in, and some software can help you gain some of that.
I think the bigger issue for the treasurer, is just to be able to really understand the finances now and report them to the board, so that the board is keeping the really important thing of that job anyway is to keep the board appraised of what the current financial reality is, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about, though, because expenses don't happen at an even pace through the year, and neither does income. And so you can't just look at what happens right at the moment. You have to understand what the trends are going to be. Can you expect more income to come in at the end, or more expenses now, or all those kinds of things?
The staff understands that. I mean, the staff has that data, that we know that,
Right.
What's the usual pace, and how much do we expect to get in before we have to start making phone calls?
Yeah, but the problem is the treasurer needs to have some of that knowledge somehow. It can't be just sort of coming out of the staff with that. I know that's.
Well, I mean, you can get it from the staff, that much they have.
But it's not been that easy, as if I found, to get that knowledge.
Are there quarterly
See, it's not just what the staff thinks is, what are the reasons, what are the reasons why it might be this way or that way, or what are the uncertainties? And that's kind of hard to, without historical knowledge, it's hard to understand those things.
I can say, having used QuickBooks, and I found it difficult, that QuickBooks has literally dozens of different reports that'll compile for you.
Right.
I know that for a fact because I have done it. And I know also for a fact I never want to do it again.
Right.
And I can understand the reluctance of anybody. But it does have that ability. The trouble is you have to have the skill to put it together. So it'll generate just about anything you want, year to date summaries, a list of all your assets and everything else. But
yeah, but
it does take some understanding.
You need to understand understand the trends. Why it went up this year, down that year, and what the obstacles might be or the opportunities might be, and that's not always so easy. And just to raw numbers don't always often tell you that.
We're having a discussion which we aren't, as a board, going to sit here and resolve
Right,
that.
yeah, anyway.
We need to decide whether we have
Mhm.
that you could start out serving as a treasurer, and if it becomes unacceptable, you could resign from that, and then we'd have to come up with some other solution. But that's where we're at. Would you be willing to start in
Well, I
this?
could go on for now, because with 1 year behind me, I'll gradually accumulate that historical knowledge, but it's just be better than find some a little more help in accumulating that knowledge, not just time. You know.
Okay, again, I guess I'd be asking whether you're accepting a nomination for treasurer.
For now, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then secretary, and I'm gonna the most important role of the secretary is to work with the recording secretary and help her with minutes. She's Marilyn Johnson is very skilled and very adept. And she sends what she does typically is she sends me as the formal secretary a draft, and went to the president, which would go to Betsy, and she and I would both comment on them, and then there'd be a draft sent to all of the board members. And then she interacts and sends her minutes. She does a lot of the work. That's why we have a recording secretary. And what the secretary's job is to work with her to make sure things get done in a timely and expeditious fashion, and then also to see that official information from the board gets to Rebecca so that it ends up either on the website or in such items as there are end up in the permanent files, which part of which is conveying final approved minutes so that they get onto our website and into her files, office files. And then, and there are some other duties, if we have to sign official documents, if the secretary has to sign an official document, then of course that takes place, as does the president. And we have to convey this information on our officers to the Secretary of State each year. That's one of the reasons why we need to get ourselves through this. So we have essentially Justin and Cindy and Luba, who can be the secretary, but we need to have somebody come forward if I and Dick and Doug are committing to 3 of the 4 officers.
I suggest Cindy. She's quite knowledgeable in doing that. I am not.
I will give it a go.
Wow, thank you.
Okay.
One thing I would say if I can about all of these positions is please keep in mind that they are board positions, not church positions. And that I think makes it feel somewhat easier. 5 years ago now, we had a board board president that thought she was the church president, and a vice president thought she was the church vice. But really, you know, this is all about dealing with the board business, giving it to the proper, passing the secretary, passing it to the proper channels, that sort of thing. So it's not quite these jobs are not quite as big as they might sound, right? It really is. It really is this group that is here right now. It is for your purposes.
Yeah, and we need to interface with the standing teams of the church as necessary. Primarily, that's the operations team, and somewhat with the endowment team, as you obviously evidenced, and somewhat with the shared ministry team is to interface with us off and on. But Cindy, I can help. I can't help so much with the treasurer. I can assign and get help from Doug as a vice president. And I can help you with the treasurer or with the secretary's job. And it's not really burdensome. It's a matter of kind of chasing after details and seeing that the proper paperwork's filed in the right places. So,
Okay.
so we have essentially nominations for the four offices, President Tom Mosher, Vice President Doug Deaton, Treasurer Dick Burkhart, Secretary Cindy Fine. And unless there's any objections, I would declare those offices filled as such. And we'll convey that. One of your jobs as secretaries would be to convey that to Rebecca so that she can file the proper work with the Secretary of State and any other place that she needs that information. The next item on the agenda is deciding on when we should have our meetings. We're a little bit behind on my time schedule that I set, but just for everybody's knowledge, last year we met at 4 o'clock on the fourth Wednesday, unless we moved it because of a holiday or something like that, for board meetings. And the Wednesday before, the third Wednesday, typically, but a week before the formal board meeting, we would have an exec committee meeting, which is prescribed as being the president, which would be me, and Vice President Doug Deaton, and a third board member. It could be, and Todd is involved in that little executive committee that sets the agenda, essentially what we do the week before. So this past year, we had a kind of a floating third board member, and we decide each meeting who should be that person. I'm not sure, Lynn, when you were president, was it one, do you recall whether it was just one person? It could be interpreted either way.
There were always three people.
Yeah.
We didn't have a rotating person.
Okay, so it was the same three people. In this past year, we rotated a person. In each meeting, we would choose who would be the next meeting. So with those two choices, does anybody have a thinking about a preference of a rotating person that would be chosen the month before, so that there'd be president, vice president, and a floating board member to help put together the agenda? That seemed to have worked pretty well last year and got exposure sometimes from Luba and sometimes from Catherine and others. So we could do that if that's agreeable, to just decide each meeting who will be the floating board member that would join the exec committee.
Agreeable with me.
Okay, well, let's go that way unless it turns out to be problematic in any way. The other thing is deciding on these on the dates. Does anybody have a problem with using the same thing? Typically the fourth Wednesday at 4 o'clock. When Lynn was the president, we started at 6 o'clock and went till 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And Betsy, because she was traveling, had a job that put her in different time zones, she wanted it at 4 o'clock. So does anybody have any preference about the time? Maybe asking the question, is 4 o'clock okay?
I prefer 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Me too.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll do typically the fourth Wednesday at 4 o'clock. It'd be nice to aim for 5:30. Sometimes we found we ran out of time and sometimes we carried an item for 2 meetings because we couldn't get to it. So I'm going to say 5:30 would be preferred, but absolutely not any longer than 6 o'clock. Are people okay with that concept?
Tom, I remember the last year what we did, and it seems like we only ran into it a couple of times, but we had the 90 minutes was the deadline, but the board could then vote to continue for 15 minutes and continue for 15 minutes and continue for 15 minutes. I mean, it gives you an opportunity to extend the board meeting as long as everyone feels willing to continue. So I would recommend you keep it at 90 minutes with the understanding that the board could vote to extend it. And you
Okay.
could even extend it by a half hour if you wanted, at 5:30. So this is going to take another half hour. Is everybody willing to go to 6 and see where we're at?
Okay, how does that work for, that would work for me, and if I'm planning the agenda, I would aim for an hour and a half, and then we could vote whether we wanted to continue, because we didn't want to leave an item unattended to. Does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
Yes, yes.
And then we would do a 4 o'clock on the week Wednesday before at 4 o'clock for the exec committee, which would be me, Doug, and a floating person that we decide in the month prior, like right, at the end of this meeting, we decide for an August meeting who would be the floating person besides myself and Doug and Todd. Is that okay? 4 o'clock on basically the third
Yeah,
Wednesdays?
yes.
Okay, all right, so, then the next item, which was number 10 on the agenda, and that puts us a little bit behind, but what about a retreat date and time? Do you have any suggestions, Todd? The board typically has a retreat in September that puts us together informally.
Yes, let me go to my September calendar and just let you know when I'm not available.
Okay,
I'm not available on the 7th because I have a wedding. That's the first Saturday. And I'm not available, actually, looking at my calendar in September, if we were to do it on a Saturday, which it usually is, the only one I really could do is the 21st. Because I have a wedding on the 7th. I'm going to be away speaking at Glacier on that weekend of the 14th. And the 28th is George Gervin's memorial service. At least that's when it's scheduled for now. So that would leave the 21st if we do it in September, which I'm okay with. And we could do it here at the house as we traditionally have been, if you guys don't mind a dog that's the size of a kangaroo. About as bouncy.
I'm available on the 21st and could pencil that in. Do you have a time frame there that works best in your household?
Yeah, usually we would start at 10 and go through lunch, and if there was any business left, we would handle that. I think 10 to 2 is usually the block that was scheduled, but generally it doesn't go that long.
Okay. Yeah, this is trying to just kind of draw us all together, do a little bit of bonding, and to get a grasp on what policy governance is, kind of what's our turf and what's not our turf kind of stuff, and generally maybe look ahead at some of the important stuff that we see coming up in the fall. Whether they're congregational conversations about UUA or 7 principles or anything else, that's a good opportunity to discuss that if we don't get to it in our August board meeting. So let's count on 9/21, September 21, and 10 to 2. And then the next item on the agenda is.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm going to be in Montreal. Can I attend by Zoom? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. We could be able to set up a computer and have you virtually with us.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Unless you guys want to wait until Doug can be here in person, so it's up to you.
That'll be November.
That'll be November. Okay.
I'm doing Trans Canada for the fall. So
okay.
The earlier the better, because there are some issues that board should be seriously undertaking for this coming year, and that's a good roundhouse time to discuss the details of the undertakings, at least a couple of them that we need to work on. Number 11 on the agenda was the composition of the exec committee. We've dealt with that. Let's see. Number 12 was to make sure that the trustees receive that I sent out, I think PDF version of, and a website link to the policy and procedures as well as the bylaws. Did all of you get that, or is no anybody not get it, so that I can see to it those are sent out again?
Tom, are we getting a binder with paper copies of all of that from Rebecca? Do I understand that correctly?
That that has not been my experience. Lynn, did that ever happen when you were on the board? And
Yes.
how does it
Yeah.
how did it happen?
Well, my understanding is that was traditionally the way it was always done. We all received a binder with paper copies of both of those things and a few other things actually. But last year, I believe when Betsy was president, she requested that, and everybody agreed that they wanted just electronic copies. But I think if you wanted paper copies, you would just probably ask Rebecca for that.
Okay.
And email today, Rebecca and I exchanged a couple of emails today. And I think she shared it with the whole board. Anytime you've got any kind of information, you can go to her, but she is very busy. That's why I sent out the policy and procedures. She did have to update it to include that email policy in there, because what was on the website didn't include that. But in answer to your question, Cindy, no notebook. I don't have one to pass on to you. If I were, if I were going off the board, I wouldn't have anything to pass to whoever takes my place.
Okay.
So electronically, anything you need by way of past history, other board meetings, information, Rebecca is the source, and she kind of fell all over herself in that email to me saying, please come to me if you want any information.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. But again, I sent out the updated version of the policy and procedures that had the email policy that was adopted a couple of meetings ago, and the bylaws, and you should have those, plus a link to the website. And then I tried to send a PDF version to each of you. So you should have that. Then these are the two items that were of interest to Todd. And me also. The item 13 was something to be taken on during this year upcoming, is how to enhance and increase our income sources. And the other one was coming to some kind of a conversation with the whole congregation or those who are interested about our church's stance on whether we want to remain with UUA or withdraw. And and also the 7 principles. It didn't get passed into the bylaws, but there seemed to be a lot of interest in having them somehow become part of our congregation more formally than just being a part of UUA. So any conversation or thoughts? Do you have any, Todd, about how to approach the income?
Yeah, well, I think one, it's not something we need to go deeply into now since it's already after 5:30. But these are, and I wouldn't call these evergreens because they do need to be dealt with, particularly the fundraising. As you know, during the budget summit number 2, we adjusted the budget with the idea that we would focus more on fundraising, and with the specific idea that the board would help us with that would be one of the hopefully one of the board projects, whether it's something the board takes on or that the board helps us put together the right team for doing that. So that's something I think that needs to be discussed in the near future. So the sooner the better. The congregational conversation, obviously, we saw what happened at the last annual meeting where there were some things about the UUA, particularly the 7 principles, and people were kind of caught off guard. So there needs to be longer conversation time to talk about this, particularly now that they have voted to get rid of the 7 principles in favor of the 7 euphemisms. So I think that is something that, whether it is the board or something the board would want the shared ministry team to take on, or we do through a variety of ways, but I do think it's, that's something we'll talk about at the board retreat, what exactly a policy governance board does. And one of the things that it really does is to keep its thumb on the pulse of the congregation. So having conversations, informal conversations, surveys, those sort of things are an important part of that piece of it. And we have that issue for sure. As far as the 7 principles go, they're already on our website. We're going to keep them there like we always have. And there may be some discussion about whether or not to place those more prominently someplace else in the church. I think it's an important part of our history and a good articulation of a lot of our principles. But I don't know if that has to be a congregational conversation, since the congregation's already spoken on it. They said, no, don't put them in the bylaws. So there's no real restriction as to where we put them, if we wanted to come up with a way to do that. So that's another conversation. But I think that the two pieces of work are going to be fundraising for this coming year, increasing our fundraising, and having a conversation about what our relationship should be, or if any, with the new UUA, which in my opinion has become the antithesis of our values here at the UU Church of Spokane.
Let's put those, because we are in a little bit of a time crunch, let's put those topics on the August agenda for a little more lengthy and in-depth discussion. And in the meantime, think about those things, having them in the back of your mind as we go through the next month. And certainly they could be further enhanced if at a retreat, but it would also be well to have some discussion in August. The next item on the agenda was the proposed amendment to the email policy that Doug and I submitted, and I'm going to also suggest that be deferred to the August meeting, so that we discuss which way to go, whether to do any amendment to the one that was adopted already or not. So I'll put that down for the August agenda. And the next item was number 16, which we already have discussed, which is the formal and informal treasury duties discussion. And so we've had kind of a roundtable discussion on that and some direction on that. Looking ahead at things that might happen after 5:30, whether or not we want to talk about them now, I would just mention them. One of the things, again, for us to think about, and we can get to it at another meeting. Typically, the board has had a past president as part of us, at least from time to time, are available for consultation. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, but past presidents would be Dick Steele, Catherine, and you. Well, are there any other past presidents that we would want to even think about who to approach or ask, which we might discuss at the next meeting?
Betsy.
That's right, Betsy. So we have, for them, obviously the most obvious. So I'm going to defer that one. Recording secretary, I have down as Marilyn Johnson with question marks. As I mentioned earlier, she has said that she would continue as recording secretary. Historian, it is a vacant position. There was some confusion that whether Susan was still doing that, and actually an email she shared with Betsy and me, and I think one with Todd, she really gave that up years ago, even referring to having given it up more or less before you came, Todd, when Hollis was still here. So
Yeah.
that's a vacant position. Moderator, we're supposed to appoint a moderator for the entire year. Typically, we only do it before the annual meeting, but I would like to approach, if the board agrees, approach Gordon Diddens and see if he would assume that role, because if we have a congregational meeting or conversation, it could be that we would need somebody before an annual meeting. Or we could, defer it until the annual meeting. Any objection to my approaching Gordon?
No.
About,
Nope.
Good.
okay. Then the other one is which is a requirement and should be done as soon as possible. Is that it's a board liaison to the ops team, and that you served in that capacity, Doug. It's kind of educational. You sit in on the ops team meeting and you don't participate, and maybe ask a clarifying question or something like that if it's necessary, and then you report back to the board what happens with this team that does the management of the day-to-day activities. Would either Luba or Cindy or Justin like to sit in on that to get somebody with a little, so you could get your feet on the ground with the day-to-day operations?
I don't want to. No,
Okay, Justin
I
said
may
no.
try. I may try.
Okay, let's do that. And maybe you can work with Doug to get a schedule of, or you can share with Luba
Yeah, okay, great.
how to plug in and work with Rebecca, so she knows that all that, we get Luba on board.
Yeah, okay, Luba.
Okay, and the only other thing that before we really can kind of shut this down, unless we want to go till 6 o'clock. We have an optional parliamentary advisor, which I have been. I can continue to be that advisor in that way, or we can have none, or somebody else can do that, can take that over. Any comments?
You should do it.
I see two nodding heads at least.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm willing to do that. Then the next item on the agenda, which is maybe where we would want to move this to another meeting, was for the board to understand and get a handle on the four really important teams: the operations team, finance team, personnel team, and shared ministry team, which I was going to count on Todd to make that presentation, so we'd all have a good grip on who they are and what they're doing or what they have done. So do we want to defer that? Are you comfortable, Todd, with deferring that till the August meeting? Okay, I'll mark that as August. And the other thing that was on the list was, and I talked with Todd about this, was there any requirement to review the ministerial agreement annually? And there's nothing in our bylaws. And I think, Todd, you said that you were going to check on that.
Yeah, it's every 3 years the board's supposed to look at it unless I ask them to do otherwise. So that would be next year.
Okay, so that'd be in 2025, 26. Okay. And then we could talk about reviewing the end statements and talk about a 5-year strategic plan, which was recommended by the last board that we try to do that this year. And it looks like that might be a task that's going to have to be put off for another year, but we can talk about that at the next meeting. Okay, so the next meeting, according to my calendar, would be going back to August, would be the 4th, would be August 28th at 4 o'clock. And then on the 21st at 4 o'clock would be me and Doug and Luba. And no, let's see. No, who do we decide would be the floating person this month?
We didn't, I don't
Ah,
think.
We didn't, but I don't mind.
unless Cindy or Justin would like to jump in there.
Yeah.
Any interest in either of you jumping in to the exec committee meeting to plan the agenda? for the regular board meeting?
I'll take Luba this time and throw my hat in the ring for the following one.
Okay, so we'll do Tom, Doug, and Luba. Right?
Right.
Okay, and with Cindy probably for September.
Yep.
Okay, we are now, it's 5:44 and 5:45. So if there isn't any other thing to come before the agenda, and we've postponed a number of stuff, moved some stuff to the next meeting. The meeting is adjourned with the August meeting planned on the 28th and let's see, was it the 28th? Where'd my calendar go? Yeah, the 28th and exec committee meeting on the 21st.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, everybody, glass of wine, margarita, cup of coffee, whatever's on your agenda.
Good job, Tom. Thank you.
Water.
Thanks for all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.